15 minutes before. Greg Bailey.
Does that mean I'm on?
Yeah, if you want to be. Or we can
Sure,
prep.
I'll be on. Miss George, I've only sold stuff to him. I've never met the man. Well, I'm going to make up for the lost time here more than once because I'm not really ready to fill 40 minutes anyhow. So now I've got
That's
even
fine
less
too.
of a problem.
Let me ask my question in advance.
Fire away.
If I wanted to try a GreenArrays hardware rather than just firing my my laptop and doing the simulation, is that still a possibility? Is that something that somebody might discuss with you?
Oh, hell yes.
All right.
We have eval kits left, and
Move forward.
when we've used them up, we'll make more.
I have every confidence that that will be the case. All right, on with the show.
All righty. Well, mostly the substantive part of all this giant presentation is merely what is the status of GreenArrays? We still exist. We've had a few people die and a few people become otherwise occupied, but still we have a core group at present that can program our chips, that can also design more if necessary. And if called upon to do that, we shall. And there's a good chance we will be called upon to do that. We are currently in the early stages of a cooperative venture with someone that we're not going to discuss, but the cooperative venture would involve actually expanding GreenArrays, making new chips, making products, selling chips, and just having a good time with it. And also with dough around to train some people to replace us when we become too decrepit to do that. Of course, none of us are too decrepit at the present. And so hopefully we will all last for a while longer and get those replacements trained, but mainly have a lot of fun with this venture, which I will not discuss further. The offices of the company have been moved to Missouri in the interest of making everything more sustainable in terms of revenue and in terms of less things to worry about. I'd rather worry about the occasional tornado than I would about some of the things that urban areas are subject to now. We've had bums in the house that was occupied by my household in GreenArrays, for example, bums just walking in the door and announcing they were going to kill people and things like that. And I'm not interested in that. Someone else can put up with it if they want to. So we're out here in the northern hills of Missouri, and they are hilly. It's hilly country, but the cool thing is that all the trees grow in the little drains where there are creeks. So while there are plenty of trees, you also can have pretty much an unimpeded view of the horizon, which is rather a neat combination. Well, it's mainly very green area. We've had presently 22 inches of rain since May when I put up the weather station here, and that's not bad. So more than we would have gotten in Oregon. And the neighbors are impeccable. A lot of Amish. The manager of the local branch of Farmers Bank is also a vice president of it and also runs a farm whose farmhouse is down the road about a quarter of a mile. He has hundreds of acres over there, as do most of the other people around here. We have a micro farm, but that's all right. We have goats and pigs and all kinds of different fowl. Debbie's bringing home some pigeons and some quail just for the hell of it today. We are still, as I said before, shipping eval kits, and we continue to have a not enormously brisk business, but people are still interested in this, and they're literally going all over went to Scandinavia this year so far, and one to Netherlands, some to other places, as well as a few in the U.S. And we intend to still be around as long as we can, and with the possibility of this cooperative venture coming along, things could look up enormously for us during 2025. So let's hope for that. I have some comments based on just generally things that people brought up today. ChatGPT. One of our associates from the Intelisys days, an inventor who was also getting screwed by um, Daniel Edwin Leckrone. Hi, Dan, you screwing people, crooked lawyer. Um, Daniel was screwing this guy, and this guy took it upon himself to ask ChatGPT about GreenArrays and about programming paradigm called Forth. And ChatGPT produced a very nicely phrased, beautifully formal, highly convincing narrative of complete bullshit. ChatGPT has absolutely not been trained on any of our products, but cheerfully talked authoritatively about them. ChatGPT assured people that the GAC 144, because that's what it thinks our chips are called, um, had an instruction set particularly designed for parallel processing. None of us who designed or used that instruction set know what the hell it thought it was talking about. But at any rate, it babbled a bunch of total bullshit about our chips, but presented it exactly as it does every other subject, nicely authoritative, and the formula was all there. I wish that people who are going to try and use ChatGPT as a source of initial briefings and summaries for what they are trying to learn, understand that its bullshit will sound exactly like its real stuff. Similarly, the fourth programming paradigm, again, ChatGPT completely missed the point of the whole thing. Again, sounded very authoritative and very credible. So beware, beware. It's a formula for artificial hubris, artificial arrogance, and artificial information.
Fake news.
The concept of 3,000 LUTs for implementing a computer. Well, that's nice. I'm glad you can do it with that. An F-18 computer has a maximum of about 24,000 transistors in it, where any gate is a minimum of 2 transistors, right? That being an inverter. A cell of memory, an SRAM bit, costs a minimum of 6 transistors. So with 24,000 transistors, I think we're actually given that that includes our memory, our stacks, our RAM, our ROM, and everything else to make an F-18. I think that 24,000 compares very favorably with 3,000 lookup tables, which are built out of memory and decoding, and a lot more than what, well, let's see, that would be roughly 8 transistors per LUT. I don't think that a LUT is only 8 transistors. So I think we kicked their ass. Yay, Chuck. Um, Updating running programs on the fly. It's an excellent thing. As Don says, it's one of the things that we do better than anybody. And it's something that we have been doing for as long as any of us has ever been able to get into a Forth machine over a distance. Live running systems with, in some cases, 1,000 users. I had one of those in Florida. And it's something that we can do. And we have the courage to do it. I take it because other people like Don's folks have known how to do this too. Good for them. Infix programming. First off, I don't think that it requires a mountainous intellect to grok reverse Polish notation. How many people have learned to use HP hand calculators? Probably a lot. Secondly, how many of those people who have used HP hand calculators have really appreciated the ability to duplicate a number before they started doing things to the number and destroyed it? We do that all the time. That's how we get reentry. Have variables floated on a task or any other damn thing like that. The stack is an important resource and it's good for an awful lot of things. But in particular, stacks are good for reentrant code right off the bat with a minimum of additional infrastructure. As a matter of fact, the first Fortran compiler I worked on, which was the one for Fortran 5 on the UNIVAC 1108, actually 1107, The first step to process an arithmetic expression was to Polish it. And then we would generate code from the Polish. We sure as hell didn't try and generate code from infix expression notation. A final little point about all that is that the question of difficulty in learning programming languages has been brought up today. I'll relate the first conceptual hurdle I had to cross as a kid. I learned to program in 3 hours one Saturday morning and then started doing things for astrophysics, right? Because that's why we were learning to program. I had no problem learning what was effectively machine language. It was an interpreted phony machine language. It was a virtual machine. Imagine that. There existed virtual machines in 1964. It was a Bendix G15 running a thing called Intercom that was a synthetic pseudo machine language. But that was what we learned to program, was a pseudo machine language. And it was obvious what that was about. And it was obvious how to use a procedural machine language. So the first time I picked up a manual on a programming language whose name was a shortening of its real title, which was Formula Translation, I, knowing a little something about math at the time, looked and said, aha, this is going to be translating formulae. And so I look at somebody that says, okay, A equals B plus C. And then later on, they say A equals B over C times e to the I theta. And I'm looking at it and saying, these are two formulas for A. What the hell are we doing with two formulas for A? If these are formulae, they are describing relationships. They're not procedural. So it was a big discovery to me that Fortran was actually a procedural language. So there are little hurdles there. All of us have been tripped by different things, but that was a big hurdle for me. God, this is actually a procedural language. It's not about formulae. It's an assignment statement. It's executable. And having executed, you can change what the relationship is. So it isn't about relationships at all. Graphics. Yay, Leon. And what we used to do was, for the similar type of thing, was to talk to X servers, which are actually X terminals or emulators of X terminals, because it's another machine independent way to talk to a GUI. And it worked out pretty well. I had the opportunity to do a lot of opining about the nature of forth, about what Chuck's gift to all of us has been, about the kind of thinking that we do, and about life in the universe in general, in an interview that was conducted by a fellow named Zach Peterson on LinkedIn. And just for laughs, I'm posting a link that will get you to that interview. In it, mainly, I held forth on the unfortunate results of overspecialization in people's educating themselves, and how detrimental this is in computer design, in computer programming, and application development and everything. What we do for a living requires a generalist. And if you're not training yourself to be a generalist, you're not training yourself correctly, in my opinion. And on the subject of generalism, probably the smartest man I ever met, and is now dead, unfortunately, long ago told me I should read Will and Ariel Durant's Story of Civilization. And for the 60 years that I knew the man, I never did manage to find a copy. But now I finally have all 11 volumes. This is volume 1, so I'm finally going to read that son of a bitch. So I've got to stay alive long enough to finish it. And the last thing, I learned something amazing, which I find incredibly hard to believe, but I can believe that as a result of overspecialization, there are people that don't understand this. Apparently, it is not uncommon in the AI community to use arithmetic on very small numbers in terms of storage so that they can do their things with a lot of numbers. And so it is not unusual to 8-bit numbers that are an encoded form of a 5-bit exponent, a 2-bit mantissa, and 1 bit of sine. What's wrong with that picture? You can't count beyond 4, for example, with a number like that. The associative law of Addition and subtraction does not hold with numbers like that unless you severely restrict the size of the numbers. I mean, really restrict it. And the only comment that I've seen in print about that sort of a number having any limitations is that it's probably more nonlinear than some other ones. Nonlinear, that's the least of its problems, right? But you meet people who don't know that you can't continue to integrate into a single precision fixed point floating point number very far before it doesn't change anymore as you're adding things to it. And there are people that don't understand that when you're computing the mean anomaly of a satellite before you decide where it is in the orbit, the first thing you do is you multiply its angular velocity by the time sense of the epoch, and you basically shift the most interesting part of that number off the low order part of the mantissa and keep all of the part that you're going to mod away by 2 pi later, right? These are things that not everybody gets because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. So generalize. If you have a kid that's learning to program, please make sure that they don't think they're going to spend 8 or 12 years studying programming, which is trivial. Make sure they study every other damn thing in the universe because they're going to need it. And that's all I have to say. I'll happily answer any questions.
Great. I may screw this up, but isn't an 8-bit floating point basically a 9-bit integer?
No,
The
no,
same
they
resolution?
they subdivide it into a 5-bit exponent and a 2-bit
Right.
mantissa. Sometimes they do a 4-bit exponent and a 3-bit mantissa.
So my point is, aren't they only saving 1 bit if they use integers? They'd have better precision. That's my point.
Well, if they had integers, they'd be able to do associative arithmetic for one thing.
Yeah.
And get the right answer every time. I just think it's hilarious. I mean, why? I mean, if they're sitting there doing a neural net, which shouldn't be done by simulating it with digital hardware in the first place, a synapse can be done with one N transistor, for Christ's sakes, and a capacitance for the gate. And how many bits of memory do you need to describe that same synapse in terms of its weight and who it's connected to?
Like on an FPGA, it would be huge. Yeah.
Yes. And an FPGA, you can't really make at least I don't think you can make it, because if everything's built out of LUTs now, you can't just sit here and wire individual transistors up anymore. So.
Yeah.
But,
so an FPGA,
well, that's
lookup table, 4 bits.
4 bits total.
Yep.
Well, it's a 4-bit address, but you've got to decode 4 bits to decide
Yeah.
which
I'm sorry.
strap
You're
to
right.
look at. So that's a lot of transistors. Funny. But no, in my opinion, if you're going to build a literal neural net, you're simulating a bunch of synapses, a shit ton of synapses, then you want to minimize A, the amount of processing that it takes to process a synapse, and B, the amount of resource that it takes to implement it. And what I would do is I would concentrate on 1 N transistor if I could get away with it, and I think I could, per synapse, and then I would have a capacitance there, and the complexity would be in updating the capacitances, keeping the charge refreshed as a dynamic device, basically. But I could figure that I'd be updating those capacitances less often than I'd be sluicing stuff through the network. But that's how it seems to me. Nobody ever asked me, so they always ask you, can you simulate this with your digital computer? And I always tell them, yeah, no, it would be a piece of crap.
Yeah, it's just one comment. I don't know if you have any interest in it, but it would be pretty easy to simulate your GreenArrays, because you could make the core 1 instruction set exactly your instruction set, and you can create all the registers. And then it'd be easier to go to the fab, wouldn't it, if in System Verilog?
No.
It wouldn't be? Okay. I don't know
No.
for sure. I'm just educate me.
The key thing about it is this, okay? If you're
Mhm.
making an asynchronous computer, which is the only reason why we're special, then you have to absolutely control loads. You have to control capacitance of lines between things, and you have to treat it as an analog design problem, not as a digital design problem. And Verilog is not about analog. The simulators are not analog. Ours are.
No,
We have to do that.
they have a new structure. It's called always com, and so you can force the synthesis tools to use combinational logic. Just only lookup tables. No, you don't register the output.
I'll make one with the FPGA that competes in any important axis, power, speed, space, with what we've got on our silicon, and I'll be interested. But
No,
there's nothing
it
secret
can't.
about the instruction set. It's published. The manuals, the CPU manual is what, 8 pages? That's not much to go and code. And there's no law that says you can't duplicate our instruction set with an FPGA. You can go right ahead. More power to you.
Yeah, I was only thinking in terms of development, not replacing or competing with you, developing newer versions of it.
Nope.
That's what I was thinking.
Nope.
Okay,
I'm worried
you just
about
use
I'm
color
worried
for it.
about controlling I'm worried about controlling femtofarads. I'm worried
Right.
about
Okay.
controlling attocoulombs,
Mhm.
and that's beyond the ken of any design tool I've ever seen. Now, if you show me one that actually, unlike anything but us, deals in those terms, great.
And color
But
forth has all that stuff built in. There's words that do that process, that calculation.
Chuck wrote the
And
original simulator in Colorforth,
right.
and the current simulator does the similar things. We've found a couple of little things to fix in the process, but yes, exactly. It is an analog simulation that we do, which we don't do a real digital simulation. It just happens the thing executes instructions, and you can look at what's in registers. But there's no clock. This is time to look at that register. No, you look at that register when it changes.
So I
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah. I actually program FPGAs that way.
Okay, Don. Asked and answered. I noticed that there's no Wikipedia article specifically on green arrays. Is that something you
There's
might
no.
probably be expected to write, or has it been written and booted off, or what's the deal?
Was it? Would you repeat the first few words of that question because they got binged?
I was looking on Wikipedia and did not see a specific article about green arrays. They're mentioned in 4 different other articles.
Ah, well, here's the deal. If I'm going to generate publicity materials, I'm going to edit them, or somebody that works for GreenArrays is going to edit them. Any bozo can say whatever he wants to on any Wikipedia page in existence, as far as I know. They are editable by the community, which includes people that don't know anything about the subject matter. Not going to let that happen. If they want to make one up, then they can make it up. But our descriptions of our computers and our processes and what to do with them is on our website. And it is under our control, not somebody that thinks that asynchronous computers are not really capable of being reliable, for example. We could be called misinformation because you can find academics that'll claim what we do is not feasible.
Well, the definition of misinformation is information that disagrees with narrative. Nothing to do with whether it's factual. And you could go to both sides. Both sides of the great
Yeah,
US divide right now and experience this. They call each other liars when they're just really disagreeing. But we digress.
right. But the point